Hi friends, welcome to Coordinate, and today we want to understand another special type of a data type or another special type of a container depending on what you understand first, which are called objects. So this is the actual implementation. You can tell the source code, it's the same source code that we've been working with. So this is the actual browser that we have. Of course, data type and then objects. We are talking about an object. What can we talk about objects? How are they different from the variables? Up to now, we've understood that a variable is simply a container that can hold on to something. But take note that a variable, let's say variable a, of course let me use the lower cases, variable a is equal to 45. You can take note that this variable is only holding on to 45. And it's not holding on, of course, to any other number rather than 45. So what if this variable was holding on, of course, to edges? Then it means we have to create multiple variables, and then this is d, and then d is also equal to 56. Let's say that's an edge, and then we create another variable, of course, that's j, and then j is equal maybe to 23, and then of course a semicolon. So this is what we can do if we want to create multiple variables that can hold on, let's say, to edges of our students in a certain class. So due to this problem, due to such issues and anything related to that, this is why we have what are called objects. So an object, we can just say they are variables too, but objects can contain many values. They can contain multiple values at the same time. So we will implement, of course, a code of a certain object, and then we will see on how objects are made. Like we said, variables are simple. They only hold on to simple types of data types. For example, only one number. I mean, that's simple. Only a number. Why not 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 26 or anything related to that? But objects, they can hold on to many values at the same time. And since they hold on to values, we can just say they are also variables too. But objects contain many values. So what are some of the key things that we need to understand when it comes to an object? Well, we understand key things like an object contains some key words which are called properties. So we understand what is a property and how can we create a property. And then we, of course, again understand that objects contain another key thing which we call the methods. We'll see how we can create a method, and we'll again understand why it is called a method and not a property, while we've understood on why properties are called properties. Well, let's just remove this content because we want this, of course, the thing that will help us to print out something on the screen to be blank for now. So we can say, okay, an object is also a variable. How do we declare, or how do we, of course, make variables when it comes to JavaScript? We use the keyword var for variable creation, and immediately when we do that, we even give the actual name. What is the name of the actual variable that you want to make? Okay, I want to create a variable, but the name of the variable, let's just say, okay, person. Okay, but this is a special type of a variable. But since it is a variable, of course, we'll stick to an assignment operator, which is an equal sign. But are we going to pass in a value? I mean, you can just tell by the name of the variable person. So meaning we want to keep multiple content about one person. Let's say we want to keep your first name, your last name, your age, and of course your phone number in the same variable that we've created. But since we are keeping, of course, more than 4 items, then we can say it is an object. An object, because it is keeping multiple values. And so I will just say, okay, I'm creating a variable called person. But for I to denote that this is an object, I will of course open the curly braces, and immediately I open the curly braces, then it's definitely done. I am creating an object. As usual, Each and every statement in JavaScript should end with a semicolon. So I will end this actual object with a semicolon. But how do I store now the content inside this object, which is called person? I mean object, person, variable, person, special type of a variable. Well, I can create by using names that will help me to have a distinctive, or should I say a specific view as to the actual content that I want to insert inside this object. I'm creating an object, or should I say a variable for person. Hence, what do I want to keep? Okay, I want to keep things like, of course, the first name. Of course, you can tell that I want to keep the first name. In addition to that, let's say, okay, what is the first name? Let's say, what is your first name? Let's say if you are Simon, then I will say, okay, I'm keeping Simon as the first name. But since it is a string, we've learned about data types in our previous session. This can be kept like this definitely. We'll keep this in double quotes and then we'll paste the actual name inside the double quotes. Strings and not a number. That is the actual distinct thing that is in between the strings and the number. Then a comma, since we'll keep multiple values. What is another thing that I want to keep inside this object, which is a special type of variable since it will keep multiple values? Another thing that I want to keep is simply the last name. And immediately I do that, you can tell that I'm denoting the things that are giving me the actual direction to the content I want to keep. I am terminating them with a full colon. Of course, you can tell the last name, since it is also a string, I mean a sequence of characters, then the double quotes, or if I want, even the single quotes can happen. So what is the last name? Let's say your last name is Kevin, then I will say, okay, keep also Kevin as the last name. Immediately I do that, I terminate with a comma. Then of course, not the actual termination that goes with a semicolon, because these are inside the actual object. And then what is another thing that I want to keep is simply the age. The age, definitely, what can I do now? Of course, the full colon, since this is simply a keyword that will allow me to see the content that I want to insert inside this, of course, object, which is a special type of a variable. And then the age, should I keep the age in between the double quotes or the single quotes? Well, the answer is a no. Why? Because age is a number. Hence, I will just keep, of course, let's say if you are 24, I will just keep 24 and then terminate with a comma. What is the other thing that I want to keep about this person? I mean, it's an object for a person. If it was for the car, I would have kept the color, the weight, and anything related to that. Or I can keep another thing. Let's say, okay, the phone number. So I will say, okay, phone number, and then since this is simply more like the thing that will allow me to understand the actual content that I want to keep inside, then I will definitely add a full colon and then a phone number. Let's say positive 26096251259, and then of course that's a phone number. Let me even remove the positive thingy, and then yeah, we've done that. I mean, we've kept the content inside this. Take note that this is the last value which is associated to a phone number I want to keep inside this object. I have removed a comma because a comma was only separating the content that should go inside the object. But since we don't need to separate for today, then yeah, it's fine. I mean, a comma, we don't need the comma since this is the last thing. So we talked at first at the preamble of this session saying an object contains key things which are called properties. So what is a property for now? So we can call, of course, first name as a property, and then we can again call last name as a property, age as a property, a phone number as a property. And like we said, these, they are helping us to, and they're more like a key to the key things that we need to keep inside the object. So how can we access now the content of the object? Well, the syntax is very simple. If we want to access the content that should be inside the actual object, we should just use the syntax which I will implement in this comment, and then we'll also use it to print out one thing. We can just say, of course, this is a single line comment, use the object name dot the actual property property name, and then yeah, most definitely this will help us to return the actual content that we want. So let's say if I want to print out something, let's say I want to print out, let's say the age of this person, then I will just say okay, person dot age. Immediately I do that. If I go on the actual browser now, you can tell that immediately I refresh, of course you will see 24 being printed out. It is a special type of a variable because it holds to multiple values. If I go back on the actual now code and then I say okay, I want now to print out the first name of this person. You've seen the syntax I'm using, I'm sure. Object name, the name of the object is simply the actual name, like the name for the variable, and then the actual property name is simply the name that is acting as a key to the actual content. I mean, it's descriptive in nature to the actual content that we want to pass into the object. If I go back again on the actual browser, I refresh, will print out Simon. Simon will be printed out because it is most definitely the actual first name for this person as an object. So this is what we can actually talk about when it comes to an object and the properties. Now you might start having questions like, okay, you've only talked about the object and the properties. Now there is this key thing again I stated in my preamble saying objects have what they call methods. Apart from the properties, there are what they call methods. What's that? What's a method? What can we learn and discuss about methods? Well, a method is simply more like, for I personally, I define it for I not to forget, most definitely. I define it as simply something that can be worked out if we combine multiple or two or more, should I say, properties of an object. That's how I define a method, as simply a product or something that can be achieved if we combine two or more properties of an object. What am I talking about? Okay, since it seems like we want to proceed with the coding and anything related to that, then let's add a comma here and create one method of this object which is called person. So take note that using the first name and the last name, we can most definitely create or have a full name. We can have a full name. I mean, we have the first name and the last name. But how can we have a full name? Well, it's by combining the first name and the last name. So how can that thing happen now? We need to create what is called a method. A method is created, of course, using the actual name for the method, which is, of course, full name, because we want to create a full name. And then, as usual, we do that by terminating this key, this method, with a full colon. Immediately we terminate with a full colon, we need now to specify what is called a function. Don't worry if you don't understand anything about functions. After the next session, our session will talk about functions and how we can create them. Though we've talked about them in our first starting sessions, but we have a full session on functions alone. So we just say, okay, I want to create a method, but this method should, of course, be inside the function which I am creating, and a function should have, of course, the parentheses, even if we won't add anything inside the parentheses. And since it is a function, then it should have a body. These, of course, the curly braces, they are just denoting the body for the actual function that we are creating. And then, what do I want? You understand, as you, of course, analyze the function, that there are two types of functions. A function that can return a value and the function that doesn't need to return a value. But we want us a value to be returned. Please don't worry if you understand nothing about functions. This actually will make you understand more things when we come to the session of function. It's just that the methods, they are highly associated with the functions. So, okay, I want to create a method called full name. Why? It's because I can, of course, get a full name from the first name and the last name. Now the method should be inside the function, and of course this is the body of the function because the curly braces denote so. And then what do we want to create? Okay, I want to return the actual name for the, of course I want to return the actual full name by getting, of course, this same object. That is what this keyword mean. This means, okay, I want to use this as a person. So if we want, we can just say, okay, I want to return person dot, of course, first name, which is the actual first name. So this is what we are saying, okay, because we said if we want to access anything, any value that is inside, of course, the object, we should use the syntax object name dot the property name. So I want, of course, to get the first name, and immediately I get the first name, of course I want to concatenate it with space the first name, because if we print out Simon Kevin without any space, I mean that might look unprofessional. So a plus, like we've said, it is an operator that concatenates, that adds two values together. Again, the space should be concatenated again to the person, which is the name, of course, of the object, person dot, of course, last name, and immediately we are done, we even terminate with a semicolon. Take note that we are saying, okay, I want to have person dot first name and then also person dot last name. But when it comes to object, the appropriate way of saying person, since we are already inside the person object, is simply, I mean, we are within, so we should just say this object, which is person, should be, of course, concatenate to this same object, which is last name. So we are saying, okay, return this object's first name, add space, and then also print out this object's last name. If we want now to print out the actual method of this object as first name, the same syntax follows. We have, of course, let me just even copy this because it is the same syntax. We'll just say, okay, if we want now to return the method, then we'll just say, okay, method name, and since a method name is inside the function, then we shouldn't forget, of course, the parentheses. And immediately when we come here, okay, we have, of course, to print out something. Now document get element by id. Id is number one. Of course, we'll print out that. We understand we've already done this using inner HTML. Now the content that should be printed out is the content inside the person's object with respect to this as a method name. What is the name of the method? The name is simply full name, and for we to denote that it is the actual, of course, full name for this method, we need to add the parentheses because the content is inside the function. If we go on our browser, most definitely we refresh, we will see Simon Kevin being printed out. Why? Because we've implemented a method. A method, from now you can even understand that, okay, a method just gets to operate on the properties of an object, because we used, of course, this first name, which is person's first name, and this last name, which is person's last name. That is what this means. And then we had to concatenate to add space in between, and of course also add the content inside these, of course, properties for we to return the full name. Now some people might ask, okay, but what if we remove, of course, the parentheses? If we remove the parentheses, we'll just, of course, print out the actual signature for the method that we've implemented, which is function return this first name and, of course, space and then this last name. This is, of course, inappropriate. I mean, who wants the user to see this, or who wants to showcase that they can code and then related to that? So this is why we are adding, of course, the parentheses. When we go on our actual browser and then we refresh, we'll see Simon Kevin. So guys, let's proceed on our next session as we understand another type of a data type, or another type of a special variable to say, which is called an array. Immediately when we understand an array, we even see the difference between the arrays and objects. Please, let's progress on our next session. Don't just forget to subscribe, and you are on Coordinate.